They said the SEAL Admiral's daughter was brain dead. 6 months gone, no return, no debate. Then a rookie nurse used a military technique the hospital didn't recognize, and the monitors answered like the dead had just knocked from the inside. This isn't a miracle story. It's a pressure cooker moment. You can picture too clearly. Harsh ICU lights the ventilator's steady hiss a pen hovering over a signature line while a father in dress whites tries not to fall apart. You've been there in some form, standing in a sterile room being told to accept a final decision you don't understand. Stay to the end, and you'll see how truth can hide behind policy and how one precise check can change everything. Don't blink. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. Emily's words did not echo in the room the way a shout would. They landed soft, almost polite, and somehow that made them heavier. Call neurology, now. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The ventilator kept its rhythm. The monitors kept their cold green sweep. Dr. Malcolm Voss stood near the foot of the bed with the withdrawal form still in his hand, the pen resting across the signature line like a verdict waiting for a wrist to obey. Nurse Carter, he said low and tight, stepped back. Emily did not step back. She stayed where she was at Madeline Keene's head, careful not to touch any tubing. Careful not to tug a line or brush a sensor loose and give anyone a reason to dismiss what they had all just seen. 2 spikes on the monitor clean enough that even the Admiral had leaned forward. 2 spikes that had cut through 6 months of certainty. Rear Admiral Thomas Keene kept his eyes on the waveform, then on his daughter's face. His posture had always been the same at this bedside, shoulders squared, hands behind his back, chin level. A man trained to keep his body quiet when his mind was screaming. But the pen, the paperwork, the phrase, "time to let her go," had finally pushed his discipline to the edge. Now his hands came forward, and he set them on the bed rail with a grip that whitened his knuckles. "You told me to sign," he said to Dr. Voss. His voice was controlled, but it had a new sharpness in it. "You told me today." Dr. Voss nodded once, as if agreement could make the moment return to its previous shape. "Because this is not therapy. This is not a wait and see. This is a final diagnosis." The Admiral looked down at the form. He did not pick up the pen. He slid the paper away from himself with 2 fingers slow and deliberate, like moving a loaded weapon out of reach. "Get neurology," he said. The order was not loud. It did not need to be. A room full of civilians still recognized the sound of command when it came from a man who had spent his life giving it. Dr. Voss's jaw flexed. For months, he had carried himself like the center of gravity in this case. He had been the physician who spoke to the family, the one who signed the notes, the one who answered questions that had no answers. He had been the gate, and a rookie nurse had just stepped through it with 2 fingers and a spike on a screen. "You are all exhausted," he said, shifting his gaze to the staff as if to recruit them. "You are seeing patterns because you want patterns. This is electrical noise. This is a machine reacting to touch." Emily kept her eyes on Madeline, not the doctor, not the Admiral. Madeline's face still looked like sleep, and that was the cruelty that never changed. The warm skin, the clean sheets, the soft rise and fall of a chest, moved by a machine. Emily had taken care of patients who looked dead in ways families could not deny. Gray skin, slack jaws, a smell that clung to the room no matter how much bleach you used. Madeline looked nothing like that. She looked like someone who would open her eyes if you said her name the right way. The charge nurse, a woman named Denise Alvarez, stood by the door with her hands folded over her stomach. She had the tired eyes of someone who had worked too many nights and learned to keep her opinions inside. Her gaze flicked from Dr. Voss to the Admiral to Emily, and she made a choice the way nurses make choices all the time, silently in the gaps between orders. She reached for the wall phone. Dr. Voss caught it. "Don't." Denise held his stare. "Sir, the Admiral requested neurology." Dr. Voss's lips pressed into a line. He looked at the Admiral again, then back at Emily. The nurse was still, and that stillness was the part that bothered him most. New nurses were nervous. They over-explained. They apologized for existing. Emily Carter had walked to the bedside like she knew exactly where her fingers needed to go, like she had done it before, like the hospital was not the first place she had learned what it meant to check for life. "Fine," Dr. Voss said. The word came out like he hated it. "Call them. Let them say what I already know." Denise lifted the phone and spoke into it with a calm that felt forced. "ICU, room 7. We need neurology at bedside." When she hung up, the room did not relax. It tightened. The moment the call went out, it turned the air into something waiting. The Admiral stayed at the rail. His eyes never left his daughter for long, but when he looked at Emily, his expression shifted from grief into a new kind of focus. Not gratitude. Not hope. Something older and harder. A calculating attention like he was assessing a person in the dark and deciding whether they were a threat or an ally. "What did you do?" he asked her. Emily did not answer right away. Her throat felt dry. She could feel Dr. Voss watching her the way he watched residents during rounds when he suspected they were bluffing. She could feel the weight of the hospital around them, a structure built of protocols and policies and people who wanted their nights to end without surprises. "I checked a point," she said finally. A response point. Dr. Voss let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if it had warmth in it. "This is a military hospital. Everybody knows a response point. That does not change a death declaration." The Admiral did not look away from Emily. "You didn't do it like a nurse," he said. Emily's fingers rested lightly on the sheet near Madeline's shoulder, careful not to touch skin unless she had to. "I did it like someone who didn't have time to be wrong," she said. Dr. Voss stepped closer. "You are out of your depth." Emily met his eyes, then let neurology prove it. The residents in the corner pretended to study the monitor, their bodies angled away like witnesses who did not want to be called. One of the respiratory therapists, a lanky man named Trevor, adjusted a setting with a hand that moved too slowly, as if making himself busy could protect him from the tension. The attending physician had spoken. The Admiral had spoken. A rookie nurse had challenged both, and the room had no safe place to put that. Outside the glass, the hallway glowed with fluorescent light. A cart rolled past with a squeaking wheel. Someone laughed somewhere down the corridor, a quick sound that felt wrong in a place like this. The ICU did not care about laughter. The ICU cared about numbers, about oxygen saturation and blood pressure and the steady insistence of machines. For 6 months, this room had been a locked scene in the Admiral's life. He came in at all hours, sometimes alone, sometimes with a junior officer who lingered by the door like an escort. He never wore civilian clothes here. Even on days when he had been off duty, he came in uniform as if the rules of appearance could hold his world together. He had learned the layout of the room by muscle memory. The spot where the chair legs caught on the floor seam. The angle of the overhead light that made Madeline's face look less pale. The sound the ventilator made when it cycled a soft whoosh that became background music to a grief that never ended. He had refused the papers again and again, each refusal treated like stubbornness by the staff and treated like survival by him. He had listened to Dr. Voss explain the tests, the confirmations, the words that sounded like science and still felt like surrender, brain death. Irreversible. No brainstem reflexes, no independent breathing. Every time he left the hospital, the ocean air outside smelled too normal. San Diego kept living. Cars moved, people ate, couples walked their dogs along the harbor. And the Admiral drove back to his base housing and sat in a quiet kitchen where Madeline's coffee mug still sat in a cabinet, where her old running shoes still waited in a closet. And he wondered how the world dared to keep turning when his daughter had stopped. Madeline had been a Navy brat, the way some kids were born into weather, adapted to it without thinking. She had learned early how to read her father's silences. She knew when he was home, but not truly home when his mind was still offshore or overseas. She used to text him stupid photos to pull him back, pictures of a crooked pancake or a stray cat on the porch with the caption, "Adopt him or I will." The last text before the accident had been simple. "Dad, I am heading out. Call you after." He had been in a briefing when it came in. He had seen it and thought he would answer later. Later turned into a call from an unknown number, a calm voice telling him there had been an incident on Interstate 5, a pileup, a trauma activation. He had driven to the hospital so fast he barely remembered the roads, his hands steady on the wheel, but his chest feeling like it had cracked open. At first, it had been a coma, then swelling, then complications, then the gradual shift in tone, the shift from fighting to managing. 6 months of slow erosion, a cliff built from polite phrases. "We have done everything. The prognosis is poor. We need to discuss goals of care." Dr. Voss had never been cruel about it. That was part of what made it hard to fight him. He spoke like someone who believed his words were mercy. But mercy had a sharp edge when it came with a signature line. Tonight, Dr. Voss had decided enough was enough. The hospital had decided really. A bed like this was not supposed to be occupied by a dead patient. Indefinitely, not even if the family wore stars on their collar. Emily had heard rumors about the case before she ever got assigned to this shift. Nurses talk. They talked about the Admiral who would not sign the daughter who looked alive, the attending who was tired of being questioned. They talked about how every month the ethics committee met, how the risk office kept circling. They talked about it the way people talk about storms, hoping it would pass without hitting them. Emily had been placed on this unit because she was new and compliant on paper. Her first month had been a blur of alarms and charting and learning how to speak to families who looked like they were drowning. She had learned quickly that hospitals ran on two kinds of rules: the rules that were written and the rules people enforced when someone made them uncomfortable. When she had been hired, her file looked clean. Good grades, calm demeanor, no drama. A nurse manager's dream. Nobody looked too closely at her quiet. Nobody asked why she flinched at sudden loud noises. Nobody asked why she kept her hands in her pockets sometimes as if making sure they were still there. She was good at the ordinary tasks. She hung IVs with a steady hand. She caught medication errors before they happened. She spoke to patients like they were human, even when they were sedated and could not answer. She stayed late without complaint. She took the worst assignments and did not talk about it afterward. That was why Denise trusted her. That was why Dr. Voss dismissed her. And that was why Emily had been watching Madeline's monitor for weeks with a concentration that looked like routine and felt like suspicion. There were moments, tiny and strange, when the numbers shifted in a way that did not fit the story everyone told. A slight change in heart rate when someone spoke close to Madeline's ear. A subtle alteration in the waveform when the Admiral leaned in and whispered something too quiet for the room to hear. Nothing anyone could chart. Nothing anyone would put in an official note. But Emily noticed. She could not stop noticing. It was not mystical. It was not a sixth sense. It was pattern recognition sharpened by the kind of training she did not mention to co-workers. Training that had taught her that the difference between life and death could be a fraction of a beat, a flicker of the eye, a response that lasted only long enough for a person to doubt what they saw. Tonight, when Dr. Voss pushed the paperwork forward, Emily saw the Admiral's hand hover near the pen. Not because he wanted to sign, but because exhaustion can make surrender feel like sleep. She watched his shoulders tighten, watched his jaw set, watched a man who had commanded sailors in combat prepare to do the one thing he had been refusing for 6 months. And she made a decision that would burn her either way. When she stepped forward, she did not feel brave. She felt focused. She felt the way she used to feel in places where the air smelled like diesel and dust, where you did not have time for debate. She pressed behind Madeline's ear with 2 fingers, not hard, not gentle, just precise. When the spike appeared, it did not feel like victory. It felt like confirmation that the room had been asleep. Now, as they waited for neurology, Emily could feel her pulse in her throat. She kept her face neutral. The hospital rewarded calm. Panic made you look guilty even when you were right. Dr. Voss moved to the monitor and stared at it like he could bully it into behaving. We declared her he said more to himself than anyone else. This is settled. The Admiral did not back away. Settled, he repeated. The word tasted wrong coming out of his mouth. You mean convenient. Dr. Voss's eyes flashed. I mean medically correct. I mean legally documented. I mean we did our jobs. Emily watched his mouth when he said jobs the way his lips tightened on the last sound. He was angry, but underneath the anger was something else, something like fear. Doctors hated being wrong not because of pride alone, but because wrongness had consequences. Wrongness could mean lawsuits, investigations, careers ending in silence. Wrongness could mean you had looked at a living person and called them dead. Denise cleared her throat softly. A small sound meant to lower the temperature in the room. Sir, neurology is on the way, she said. Dr. Voss did not acknowledge her. He stepped toward Emily, stopping just outside her personal space. His voice dropped so the Admiral could not hear every word. You do not understand what you are playing with, he said. Emily kept her gaze steady. I understand exactly what I'm playing with. This family is clinging, he said. They are drowning in grief. You do not throw a rope made of fantasy. Emily did not raise her voice. Then let neurology cut the rope, she said. If that is what this is. Dr. Voss's nostrils flared. And if you are wrong, the consequences will be yours. Emily nodded once, then I will carry them, she said. She could feel the Admiral's attention shift toward them as if he sensed the quiet confrontation even without hearing all of it. He had spent years reading rooms where men spoke in half-sentences and hidden meanings. He knew when pressure was being applied. He knew when a person was being tested. He addressed Dr. Voss without turning. Fully his eyes still on his daughter. Nobody touches that ventilator, he said again. Nobody changes a setting. Nobody calls a transport. Nobody moves her. Trevor, the respiratory therapist, lifted both hands, slightly palms out. No changes, he said, voice quick. We are stable. The Admiral nodded once. He turned his head toward Emily. What is your name? He asked. Emily Carter, she said. Carter, he repeated. He looked down at Madeline's face. My daughter's name is Madeline, he said, as if anchoring the room to that truth mattered. You are the first person in months who asked her body a question and waited for an answer. Emily swallowed. The air in the room smelled like plastic and antiseptic and something metallic that always lived in I see us, no matter how clean they were. She wanted to tell him she was not sure. She wanted to tell him she was terrified. She wanted to say she had seen hope turn into cruelty when people chased it too hard. But she did not say any of that. She stayed quiet because in this room words could become weapons in someone else's hands. A monitor beeped slow and steady. Madeline's heart rate held. The ventilator pushed air into her lungs like a metronome. If you looked only at the machines, you could pretend it was normal. Emily knew better. The machines were only proof that the body could be maintained. They were not proof of who was inside. The Admiral leaned closer to his daughter's ear, careful not to disturb the lines. His voice softened, not for the room, not for Dr. Voss, not even for Emily. For Madeline. It's Dad, he murmured. I'm here. Emily watched the monitor. A tiny shift. Not enough to claim, enough to notice. She kept her expression unchanged. Dr. Voss saw her eyes flick and stiffened. Stop looking for ghosts, he snapped. The Admiral turned his head slowly, and the temperature in his gaze made Dr. Voss pause. My daughter is not a ghost, he said. Denise stepped forward, putting herself closer to the center of the room like a shield. Doctor, she said gently, let neurology assess. That is all. For a moment it looked like Dr. Voss might argue again, might pull rank, might force the room back into the narrative that had kept this case clean and closed. But the Admiral's presence was a kind of gravity Dr. Voss could not override. Not tonight, not with that monitor still holding the memory of 2 spikes. So Dr. Voss stepped back, folding his arms across his chest. He planted himself at the foot of the bed the way a man stands when he refuses to be moved from his position, even if the ground under it starts to shift. Emily remained by Madeline's head. She could feel sweat at the base of her neck trapped under her collar. She kept her hands visible, relaxed as if she had nothing to hide. She kept her posture neutral, her breathing steady. The discipline did not come from courage, it came from habit. Minutes passed with the slow cruelty of waiting. Each second seemed longer because no one spoke. The room was full of sound and still full of silence. The ventilator, the monitors, the soft shuffle of feet outside the glass. Then, far down the hallway, there was a change in rhythm. Faster footsteps. A purposeful cadence that did not belong to a wandering resident or a nurse on a casual round. The ICU doors at the end of the corridor opened and closed with a sharper sound like someone had pushed through without hesitation. Denise glanced toward the entrance. Emily did not move, but her focus sharpened. Dr. Voss lifted his chin the way he did when he prepared to defend himself. The Admiral kept his hand on the bed rail, his eyes still on Madeline's face, as if he was afraid that looking away even for a second might cost him something he could not name. The door to ICU room 7 opened. She did not pause in the threshold the way visitors did. She moved like she belonged to the hallway, and the hallway belonged to her quick steps. Shoulders forward, eyes already taking inventory. Navy scrubs hair pulled tight, a badge that caught the light for half a second before it vanished beneath her hand as she lifted it to push the door wider. Lieutenant Commander Dr. Serena Park. She crossed the room without looking at anyone's face until she reached the bed. Then she stopped at the monitor first, not the patient. Her gaze held the waveform the way a pilot holds the horizon, calm and unforgiving. "You called neurology," she said. Her voice was level-clipped, built for rooms where seconds mattered. "Tell me why." Dr. Voss answered too fast, as if speed could outrun doubt. Nothing happened. A nurse touched the patient, and the monitor reacted. "The family is struggling. That is all." Dr. Park turned her head slightly, not enough to give Dr. Voss her full attention, just enough to acknowledge he was in the room. "Your name," she said. "Malcolm Voss, intensivist attending on this case." Dr. Park nodded once, then looked at the Admiral. Her expression did not soften, but it steadied the way professionals steadied when they recognized rank and grief in the same body. "Rear Admiral Keene," she said. "Sir, what did you see?" The Admiral's eyes stayed on his daughter's face for a moment, as if he needed to confirm she was still there before he spoke. "I saw the monitor change," he said. "Twice. I saw the nurse do something specific and get the same response both times." Dr. Park shifted her gaze to Emily. "And you," she said. "Nurse Carter." Emily felt the title land on her like a hand to the shoulder. Not permission, responsibility. "Yes, ma'am," Emily said. Dr. Voss let out a quiet breath that carried impatience. "Commander," she pressed behind the ear. "That is not diagnostic. Brain-dead patients can have peripheral noise, spinal activity. Machines can glitch." Dr. Park did not argue with him yet. She leaned closer to the bed and studied Madeline's face. Warm skin lashes resting against cheeks, the faint outline of a pulse in the neck that was only there because a machine was doing its job. Then Dr. Park looked at the ventilator settings. She checked the lines, the placement of sensors, the cable routing. Small things, the kind that separated a clinician from a spectator. "Show me," she said to Emily. Dr. Voss scoffed. "This is a closed case." Dr. Park's eyes did not move. "Show me," she repeated. Emily stepped closer to the head of the bed. She moved with a careful economy, not brushing tubing, not bumping the IV pole. She could feel the room watching her now, every person leaning into the moment without moving their feet. Her fingers found the spot behind Madeline's ear. Dr. Park's attention locked to the monitor. Emily pressed. The waveform answered with a small spike, clean and sharp like a needle tap. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Dr. Voss lifted his chin. "Artifact," he said, as if naming it made it harmless. Dr. Park did not respond. She leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the shape of the spike, at the timing, at the way it rose and fell. Again, she said. Emily pressed again, same pressure, same placement. Another spike. The room did something strange. It did not explode into hope. It did not collapse into panic. It simply lost its old confidence. The air changed texture like someone had opened a window in a sealed space. Dr. Voss stepped toward the monitor, voice tight. Electrical noise. It happens. A touched lead static discharge. Dr. Park lifted a hand palm, slightly raised, not for silence but for control. Stop talking, she said, not harshly, just cleanly. She reached down and checked electrode placement with her own fingers, tracing the cables, confirming contact. She looked at the machine, then at the lines running from bed to monitor. Repeatable response, she murmured mostly to herself. Dr. Voss crossed his arms, planting his feet like a man defending a territory. Commander, we have documented brain death. Multiple exams. Confirmed. There is nothing to reopen. Dr. Park straightened and finally looked at him fully. Her eyes were not angry. They were colder than anger. Then you will not mind repeating the exam, she said. The Admiral's hand tightened on the bed rail. His knuckles stayed white. His breathing stayed steady by force. I am not asking for a miracle, he said quietly to Dr. Park. I want to know if my daughter is dead. Dr. Park nodded once, and that nod had weight. It was the nod of someone who understood that truth was not comforting. It was simply necessary. Then we do this properly, she said. Dr. Voss tried to interrupt. Commander, with respect, you are being pulled into a false narrative because a nurse pressed a point that could trigger a local response. There are known spinal reflexes. Lazarus sign. Triple flexion. Peripheral autonomic shifts. Dr. Park did not flinch at the vocabulary. She did not argue the science either. She took one step toward the bed again and pointed at the monitor. That spike is time-locked to her stimulus, she said. Twice. Clean, not drift, not random. Dr. Voss's jaw moved as if he wanted to crush the words before they existed. It still does not mean consciousness. It means something is happening, Dr. Park said. And I do not decide what it means from a hallway assumption. She turned to Denise. Charge nurse, she said. Yes, ma'am, Denise answered quickly. I want respiratory here, Dr. Park said. Now, I want a full brainstem exam set up. I want apnea testing prepped, not performed until I clear all prerequisites. I want labs. Get blood gas.